Gundam.tk presents Master Grade Duel Gundam Assault Shroud. Hey, what's up again, everybody? It's Robert 184, 2Rs2Bs from GundamReviews.net, and you've seen the plates and you've seen the parts. Now it's time to actually take this whole mobile suit and put it together and check out the Duel Gundam. And don't forget that, yes, First Grade Exia is back there wearing part of the Assault Shroud, which will be added. When he's all put together, what do you think about this guy? I'm reminded of the G3 a little bit from the front, even though you've got the blue instead of the purple, and he certainly is more colorful than the G3, but overall the impression is still a little bit dull. But on the plus side, you have to give props to this because it does look very much like a Master Grade. I'm talking about with this gray, the dark gray inner frame poking out in places all over the place. The blue in terms of colors is going to look good, and that little bit of orange up there on the chest and the head are going to help bring them to life somewhat. The backpack is going to look good from whatever angle you look at it from, and the gray parts there, the strike-ish shoulder aspect, is again a nice plus. In terms of articulation, you can imagine that with a waist skirt like this that you're going to have no problem bringing the legs forward. Remember that these parts can move up and down, so you can lock them in fairly steadily into place. The side skirts are going to go up about that far, so you can almost get full splits. You probably could if you wanted to push that up any further. In terms of the knee bend, you're going to get that full 180 with that nice blue part there bending. And in terms of the ankles, they're going to move here and down below on a ball joint. And remember that the front part of the foot can move as well. For the upper body, you can rotate the waist and you can pivot it off to the side a ridiculous amount there. You can't spin it around too much here. Remember, actually, it's pretty cool that these parts are free to move, but you can't rotate it around too much unless you're willing to pop off that back skirt. The shoulders, remember, are going to pop up a very nice degree there, and if you want to move this part here on the shoulders, they're going to move incredibly, and you can bring them forward if you twist this out of the way. You can bring them about this far forward, so not quite as much as you may have seen before on the parts. Now, the shoulder has popped out ever so slightly there, but you can rotate it somewhat, except for the fact that it's going to bump into this part here that attaches onto the beam saber. Rotate there at the shoulders, and you can bend the arms all the way up for a 180, and the wrists are not going to move anything 00 style. And that cool looking head is going to move on that gray part down below and on the polycap on the top, so you can move it around in two different places. For weaponization, you're going to want to put in these 4 fingers here that are going to have a peg to attach into the shield and the beam rifle, which is pretty cool. Rotate this part around so it's on the back, so this can plug into the back of the elbow, and then just adjust this gray part down to the lower position. To put the right hand into the beam rifle is actually pretty cool though. It's got a big peg here, certainly larger than something you'd see on something like the Master Grade Death Scythe. And because it's got a big triangular peg, it's got a little bit awkward to get it in, but once you do, it certainly seems like it's going to stay well in place once you actually put it into the hand. Weaponized here, I have to say that I'm really impressed with the way that the beam rifle goes in. Not so much here with the shield, because you can imagine that it is going to bump into the shoulder up there, so you're not going to get too many options in terms of rotating. You're going to have to be a little bit careful with how you move the lower arm. But overall, he does fill out a lot more with his weapons on. That strike-like shield is certainly always going to be a plus. And the weapon over here is certainly a lot more interesting than your regular beam rifle. Is it enough to save him visually? That's a question for the comparison, though. Now, this isn't an appropriate height comparison because of the pose that the H1 normal's in, but I think it just sort of gives you an idea that I would say that even though this guy is going to have more of the Master Grade-like details with the inner frame protruding all over the place strike style, I'd say that the H1 just seems to have some better proportions, although that's just completely subjective there on my part. The shield is a little bit better on this one just because it's got the 2 colors. I'd give the edge to weapons, but overall I'd have to say that the H1 is still going to look better, even though these are both very recent Master Grades. And for a very old school comparison, here you've got the F90 from all the way back in 1990 on the right. And remember that this has 3 different sets of weapons attached on, never mind just one Assault Shroud. And sometimes it's hard to imagine that Seed is not going to be for necessarily newer fans, being a decade old already. So here it is next to the 00 Gundam. Remember that this is the 7-sword one, so there's quite a few differences here from the regular one or the 00 Riser. But you can see in terms of height that the 00 is going to take the edge. Big shoulders, or so it seems on the Duel, until you see the Riser, or until you see the 00 Gundam, and just in terms of overall bulk, certainly no question as to who wins here. So if the Duel isn't going to win any points in a just straight-off looks competition, well, let's see what that new inner frame can do, and this was an incredibly easy pose to achieve, thanks in no small part to the fact that that waist can move around as much as you've seen. The legs have very, very good mobility, as you saw with the 180 down below, And the arms can move around so you can get the shield into most places as long as it doesn't bump into that shoulder. But very, very impressive, because you know that a lot of other Gundams would topple over this way if you tried to pull off a pose like this. Standing up, the ankles, which I was a little bit concerned about, are actually seeming to be working out very, very well. It's not flat over here, but still no problems in terms of stability. That shield is going to look good pretty much wherever you position it, as long as you keep it down below that problem shoulder. And that weapon over there in his right hand is looking better and better, I think, every time I see it. Not to mention the fact that those thrusters are certainly a bonus. It's just too bad that you're never going to display them from the back. With his weapon crossed over the shield, I just wonder if Bandai has not found that perfect mix of posability in the legs and yet still keeping things solid. That's something that, let's say, Master Grade Exia didn't quite find. But overall, I've just been impressed with all of the few poses that I've tried to do with this guy, that they're all going to look good. You'll notice that top of the knee part there is going to pop out a little bit awkwardly depending on how you do that. I wonder if that's something that can be easily fixed. Now, Isaac, the pilot, being one of the calmer characters in all of the Gundam universe, you could never imagine him flying off the handle and just pushing his mobile suit to the extreme. This arm over here is certainly going to move pretty well, and you can use that shield almost as a weapon, as it's got those points down there. And the beam sabers are going to look good no matter which hand you put them in, and as a plus, they do fit in very, very well because of the pegs on that 4-finger attachment. And thanks to the Action Base 2 attachment, which is going to be included with this, and I'd imagine every Master Grade that's going to come out in the Seed line, and pretty much every Master Grade that ever comes out, you can see that you can do all sorts of cool things, because those legs, again, which will allow you to angle at pretty much any part there. The blue parts are only going to look a little bit awkward if you look at them from the side. If you look at them straight on, I don't think they've ever looked bad for me. But overall, this guy is certainly impressing in terms of the posing department. And in terms of just pure BFG, I thought this would be a pretty cool weapon to put on here. It is going to have the same triangular attachment point to get this into the manipulator there, but it certainly didn't work as well with this one as it did just for the regular gun. And you're always going to have that Gundam Bazooka syndrome where it's always going to have trouble fitting up on the shoulder. This Master Grade 1 is better than something, especially compared to a high grade, but overall it took about 3-4 attempts before those fingers all stayed in without falling out, and the actual hand stayed attached to the weapon, and you could get it into the shoulder properly. But problems aside, when it spins around there, you can angle the shield however you want, but especially up with aerial poses where you can get the legs just where you want them to be, that all of a sudden the Duel Gundam, which was looking pretty dull, has certainly been brought to life, I'd say. So that's going to wrap up my look at the mobile suit mode of strictly the Duel Gundam, that I have to say that at the beginning I was pretty unimpressed when I put it together just in terms of looks. But actually in terms of posability, if this is an indication of what we're going to be seeing with the Seed kits and their inner frame, it's all plus from here. If you want to go ahead and use the beam sabers and the aerial base, and if you want to go ahead and use the extra weapons, I think you can have even more fun with this guy. So all of a sudden, he's somewhat impressive, so why don't you let me know what you think of him? Would anybody out there actually buy just a Master Grade Duel Gundam? I'm trying to think. I think Bandai has only ever sold the Assault Shroud. The Assault Shroud was introduced pretty early, and you can tell that the similarities were there. It was designed to be sold this way. Anyway, I'm just curious if anybody is a big enough fan of what you've just seen over this part to go and pick this up if it were for some chance sold on its own. Well, anyway, it's a bit of a moot point though when you stay tuned for the next part where you can see this with the Assault Shroud attached on, the way that the Duel Gundam and Isaac was meant to be. So anyway, everybody, stay tuned for that, and as always, it's always appreciated when you comment, and thank you very much for watching. See you next time, everybody. Excuse me, but I think that big weapon of yours belongs to me. What are you talking about? Take a look at that right arm of yours. That belongs to my good friend.